Snow came early that year, falling over the small Vermont town like a quiet warning. People here noticed everything: new cars, unfamiliar faces, changes in routine. Daniel Harper had lived among them his whole life, and he knew how to move carefully, how to blend in, how not to give anyone a reason to ask questions. He was 34, steady, dependable, and polite. He worked at a local insurance office, greeted the same people every morning, and spent his evenings alone in the house he inherited from his parents. From the outside, his life looked settled. From the inside, it felt unfinished. Daniel had learned to hide parts of himself so well that even he sometimes forgot they were there. He followed the rules, attended community events, and nodded along to conversations he didn't fully believe in. He thought that was what adulthood meant, choosing peace over truth. Then Michael Reed arrived. Michael came to town in late spring, driving a dusty blue car and wearing a tired smile. He rented the old white house near the lake, the one people said had good bones but needed work. The town noticed him immediately. A newcomer always stood out, especially one who was friendly without trying too hard. Daniel first met him at the hardware store. Michael was struggling to carry a box of tools, and Daniel offered help without thinking. Their conversation was short, simple, and polite. But something about Michael stayed with Daniel long after they parted ways. They met again a week later at a local cafe. Then again while walking near the lake. Slowly, without effort, friendship formed. Michael was easy to talk to. He listened carefully and laughed easily. He asked questions Daniel wasn't used to answering about his dreams, his regrets, the things he wanted but never said out loud. Daniel found himself opening up, not all at once, but enough to feel lighter afterward. Michael had his own past. He spoke openly about a marriage that ended quietly and painfully. There was no bitterness in his voice, just honesty. Daniel admired that. He had spent years avoiding honesty with himself. Their friendship became routine. Coffee after work, walks in the evening, long conversations that stretched into the night. Daniel told himself it was normal. People needed friends. People needed connection. But there were moments, small, sharp moments, that made his heart race. The way Michael smiled when Daniel spoke. The way silence between them felt full, not empty. It's the way Daniel felt seen in a way he never had before. Daniel tried to ignore it. He told himself it would pass. It didn't. Instead, the feeling grew stronger, heavier, impossible to dismiss. Daniel began to understand that what he felt was more than friendship. It was longing. It was fear. It was something he had been running from his entire life. The town had rules, even when they weren't written. Daniel knew them well. People here believed in tradition, in things staying the same. They believed love followed a certain path, and anything outside it was dangerous. Everyone was afraid of what they didn't understand. Daniel had heard the comments before, spoken casually, without cruelty but full of certainty. Words like unnatural, wrong, and confusing floated through conversations as if they were facts, not opinions. Daniel never argued. He never reacted. He learned that silence kept him safe. But silence came at a cost. Michael didn't pressure him. He never crossed a line. Still, Daniel sensed that Michael felt something too. It showed in his eyes, in the pauses before he spoke, in the way he sometimes seemed to pull back, as if protecting both of them. One evening, summer faded into fall, Daniel invited Michael over for dinner. It felt like a small step, but his hands shook as he set the table. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that made thoughts louder. They ate, talked, laughed. The comfort between them was undeniable. After dinner, they sat in the kitchen, mugs of coffee cooling between them. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The first snowflakes began to fall. Daniel felt something pressing against his chest. He knew this moment mattered. He knew that avoiding it would only make things worse. Michael looked at him, thoughtful and serious. He opened his mouth, closed it, then took a breath. Daniel's heart pounded. Michael seemed to struggle with his words, as if choosing them carefully. "Daniel," he said quietly, "there's something I've been wanting to say." Time slowed. Daniel felt fear rise like a wall. Fear of change, fear of being seen, fear of losing everything he had built by staying quiet. He waited. Michael hesitated, then stopped. He looked away, jaw tight. "I don't want to make things difficult for you," he said instead. "I know this town. I know how people think." Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't. Michael stood up, forcing a small smile. "Thank you for dinner. It was good, really good." When the door closed behind him, Daniel remained seated, staring at the empty chair across from him. His chest felt hollow. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Daniel lay awake, replaying the evening again and again. He realized that the fear he had lived with for years was no longer quiet. It demanded attention. Days passed. Michael became distant, not cold, but careful. Their conversations shortened. Their walks stopped. Daniel felt the loss deeply. He understood why Michael stepped back, but understanding didn't ease the pain. He missed him more than he expected. At work, Daniel struggled to focus. At home, the silence felt unbearable. He began to question everything he believed about himself, about love, about what it meant to live honestly. He thought about the way people spoke with certainty about things they never experienced. He thought about how easily fear disguised itself as tradition. One evening, Daniel walked alone to the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky above. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, breathing in the cold air. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to think the truth without pushing it away. What he felt wasn't wrong. It didn't hurt anyone. It didn't come from rebellion or confusion. It came from connection, from care, from something deeply human. Everyone might be afraid of it. Everyone might think it was against nature. But standing there alone with his thoughts, Daniel began to realize something important. Nature didn't make him feel ashamed. Fear did. And as he turned away from the lake, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Pretending any longer would cost him more than the truth ever could. The days after that night stretched long and gray. Daniel felt a strange emptiness in the routines that once gave him comfort. Coffee tasted bland. Work felt distant. Even the town's familiar chatter seemed hollow. Every sound, every glance, reminded him of Michael, of the unfinished words, of the silence that had stretched between them. It wasn't anger he felt, it was longing, raw and sharp, a quiet ache that refused to fade. Daniel tried to stay busy. He fixed fences, helped neighbors carry groceries, attended the usual weekend gatherings. Each action was mechanical, a way to push away thoughts he couldn't control. Yet, no matter how busy he became, Michael's presence lingered like a shadow. He thought about Michael's eyes, his smile, the way he had paused that night, torn between honesty and caution. That pause had changed everything. It was simple, fleeting, but Daniel remembered it vividly. Weeks passed and the cold settled in. Snow coated the town again, muffling sounds and slowing movement. Daniel would walk near the lake every evening, hoping to see Michael. Each time his heart leaped at a familiar figure on the path, only to sink when it turned out to be someone else. He began to understand that longing could feel heavier than loss. That the space between two people could weigh more than distance or absence. One afternoon, unable to contain the restlessness, Daniel drove to the lake, his coat pulled tight against the winter wind. He wanted clarity. Callie wanted a sign. He wanted an end to the tension that had rooted itself deep in his chest. When he arrived, he almost turned away, but then he saw Michael standing near the water. He looked calm, distant, yet somehow aware, like he had been waiting for this moment too. They didn't speak immediately. The silence stretched between them, not awkward, but intense. Daniel's mind raced, searching for the right words, afraid any sentence would shatter the fragile connection they still held. Michael watched him, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders relaxed but guarded. Time seemed suspended, like the lake itself held its breath. Finally, Michael spoke. His voice was low, careful. "I left that night because I didn't want to push you, Daniel. I knew it might be too much." He paused, studying Daniel's expression. "I know what this town would say. I know the weight of expectation, of judgment. But I can't stay silent anymore." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to argue, to apologize, to explain, but no words came. Instead, he looked at Michael, really looked, and saw a man willing to face the world for honesty, for connection, for something real. "I'm tired of being afraid," Daniel whispered. His voice shook, betraying years of restraint. "I don't want to hide anymore. Not from you, not from myself." Michael stepped closer, but not too close. The air between them felt charged, alive with unspoken understanding. "Then don't," he said simply. "Not for me, not for anyone else. It's only for you." For the first time in months, Daniel felt a release, like a dam breaking inside him. The fear that had dictated his every move, that had kept him from feeling fully alive, began to crumble. He realized that his silence had been both a shield and a prison. And now, for the first time, he could choose honesty. They walked together, along the lake side by side, words minimal but connection profound. Michael shared stories from his past, small personal moments that revealed his heart without shame. Daniel listened, feeling the weight of judgment lift, replaced by understanding, by trust. They laughed quietly at times, the sound mingling. With the wind and the soft crackle of ice forming along the lake's edges, Daniel began to notice the town differently. The same streets, the same neighbors, now seemed less oppressive, less full of silent rules. He realized that much of the fear people held wasn't real, it was inherited, taught, repeated without question. His own heart had carried fear long enough. He would not let it define him any longer. Days turned into weeks, and their friendship deepened into something neither could ignore. They shared meals, worked on small projects around Daniel's house, and spent evenings near the lake watching. The sun set behind frosted trees. Each day felt like a careful dance, a balancing act between connection and caution. Yet Daniel noticed that restraint didn't diminish. Closeness, it enhanced it, made every glance, every touch of the hand, on the back, every shared laugh more significant. One night they found themselves alone at Daniel's kitchen table. Outside, snow fell silently, covering the world in white. Daniel looked at Michael, the man who had brought warmth and clarity into his life, and realized he no longer feared judgment. He feared nothing but the thought of losing Michael, of letting hesitation control him once more. Michael's eyes met his, filled with the same quiet intensity Daniel had seen months ago. "You don't have to be afraid," he said again. "Not with me. Not now. Not ever." Daniel nodded, a lump rising in his throat. Words felt inadequate, so he simply reached across the table, brushing his hand against Michael's. It was small, subtle but full of meaning. It was a promise, unspoken but understood. In that moment, Daniel understood the truth he had been avoiding. Love was not against nature, was not a mistake or a deviation. Fear was what twisted it, kept it hidden, kept it lonely. What felt natural to the heart was never wrong. They spent hours talking that night, sharing hopes, regrets, and dreams. The conversation flowed effortlessly, each word reinforcing the bond they had built. Daniel realized that bravery wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up consistently, honestly, and with an open heart. Weeks later, the town remained unchanged. People still whispered, still held on to old beliefs. But Daniel and Michael had discovered something stronger than gossip or fear. They had discovered the power of choice, of honesty, of connection. They walked along the lake again, winter now, in full swing. Snowflakes landed softly on their coats. Daniel glanced at Michael, who smiled back without expectation, without fear. Simply acknowledging what had grown between them, Daniel felt a quiet certainty. He could not change the town. He could not make others understand. But he could live truthfully, with courage, with care. And in that, he found freedom. The story of two hearts discovering honesty. Slowly and carefully unfolded not in dramatic declarations, but in shared moments, in trust, in the courage to feel. They did not need approval, only each other. And that was enough, because sometimes the most profound stories are not about grand gestures. They are about small, consistent acts of bravery, about standing beside someone, seeing them clearly, and refusing to let fear dictate the heart. Daniel and Michael continued to walk, talk, and live side by side, knowing that what they had discovered was natural, beautiful, and worth every risk. The town may never fully understand, but their hearts did. And for them, that was all that mattered. The snow fell, the lake shimmered, and two people moved forward, one quiet step at a time, into a future built on honesty, trust, and the kind of love that fear could never touch.